"Dad, you're a failure. You've done nothing with your life." Madison's voice sliced through the dining room, her sneer as sharp as a blade. Corinne laughed coldly, clutching her wine glass. "He's right, you know." Their words stung, but I smiled. My fingers brushed the phone in my pocket. I pulled it out, tapped the screen, and held up a screenshot. Their faces froze, mouths open, eyes wide. The room went silent, save for the ticking of the clock. I stood up, leaving them staring, and walked out. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The dining room smelled of overcooked steak and betrayal. Madison's fork clattered against her plate, her eyes blazing. "You're nothing, Dad. A nobody who's embarrassed us for years." Her voice cracked, sharp with venom, as she shoved her chair back, the legs scraping the floor. Corinne sipped her wine, her lips curling into a smirk. "What did you expect, Madison? He's always been a disappointment." She tapped her manicured nail on the glass, the sound like a metronome of scorn. Their words hit me like punches, but I sat still, my hands clenched under the table. I'd heard their jabs about my failure as a freelancer and my quiet life in this creaking house before, but tonight was different. Tonight, their cruelty felt final, like a door slamming shut. I stared at the crack in my plate, a jagged line splitting the ceramic. It reminded me of us, broken but held together, together by habit. "You're just an old man rotting in that closet of an office," Madison spat, tossing her hair. Corinne chuckled, her laughter as cold as the wine she drank. I didn't answer, not yet. My chest burned, but I kept my face blank. Years of swallowing their insults had taught me patience. I thought of the sacrifices, nights working late, paying for Madison's college, buying Corinne's jewelry while she bragged to her golf club friends. All for this. "You're a burden," Corinne said, her voice low and almost bored. "We barely scrape by because of you." That was it, the dam broke. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing the cracked screen of my old phone. It was heavy, not with weight, but with truth. "You think you know me?" I said, my voice steady. They froze, startled by my tone. I tapped the screen, pulled up the screenshot, and held it out. The light from the phone cast shadows on their faces. Their reactions were instant. Madison's mouth fell open, her hand flying to her lips. Corinne's glass slipped, shattering on the floor, wine pooling like blood. The room went quiet, the only sound being the ticking of the clock on the wall. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Whatever they had seen on that screen had done the talking for me. I stood, my chair creaking, and walked out. Their eyes followed me, wide with shock, but I didn't look back. My footsteps echoed in the hall, each one heavier than the last. I reached my office, a cramped room stuffed with old books and a wheezing computer. The door clicked shut behind me, locking out their voices. I sank into my chair, the phone still warm in my hand. My heart pounded, but not with fear. For the first time in years, I felt alive. I set the phone on the desk, its cracked screen catching the dim light. They didn't know what I'd been hiding, what I'd built in silence, but they would soon. They'd understand everything. The kitchen smelled of spilled wine and panic. Corinne stood by the sink, her hands gripping the counter, her blonde hair falling loose from its perfect bun. "What was that, Madison?" she snapped, her voice tight. "What did he show us?" Madison paced, her phone clutched like a lifeline, her fingers swiping the screen. "It's fake," she muttered. "It has to be. He's bluffing Mom, Dad with that." "No way." Her laugh was shrill, but her eyes darted to the hallway where I had disappeared. I sat in my office, the door locked, the silence thick. My phone lay on the desk, its cracked screen now dark. Their voices carried through the walls, sharp and frantic. "He's playing us," Corinne said louder. "He's always been weak. Is just another pathetic trick." Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse. My fingers tapped the desk, the wood worn smooth from years of restless nights. They thought they knew me. They thought I was nothing. A fist pounded on the door. "Martin," Corinne's voice was sugar-coated, but it dripped with venom. "Open the door." We need to talk. I didn't move. Madison's voice joined in, high and jagged. You think you can scare us with some photoshopped garbage? I'll post this online, Dad. Everyone will know you're a liar. Her words hung in the air, but they were empty. She wouldn't post anything, not yet, not until she knew what I had. I leaned back in my chair, the springs creaking. The office was a mess, with books piled on the shelves and a family photo face down on the desk. I hadn't looked at it in months. The memory of their laughter at dinner twisted in my gut, but I pushed it down. They wanted answers. They'd get them, but on my terms. Martin, don't be ridiculous, Corinne called, her tone shifting to fake concern. Whatever that, we can work it out, she said. Her fist hit the door again, softer this time. I pictured her out there, her lips pursed, her eyes calculating. She'd always been good at playing the victim when it suited her. Madison muttered something, her voice too low to catch, but I heard the clack of her nails on her phone, probably drafting a post she'd never send. You'll see, I said, my voice low but firm, loud enough to carry through the door. Your time's coming. Silence followed. I imagined their faces, Corinne's eyes narrowing, Madison's mouth twitching. They didn't know what to do with me now. The man they'd mocked for years wasn't caving. Corinne tried the knob, the door rattling in its frame. You can't hide forever, she hissed. Her footsteps retreated, sharp heels clicking on hardwood. Madison lingered. I heard her breathing, quick and uneven. This isn't over, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Then she was gone, her steps fatting. I picked up the phone, its weight grounding me. The screenshot was still there, waiting. I knew what it meant. My gaze fell on the family photo, its frame coated in dust. For a moment I saw us as we were, smiling together before the crack spread. Then I blinked and the memory was gone. They'd made their choice, now I'd make mine. The office was dark, lit only by the flicker of my ancient computer screen. I sat alone, the silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the machine. My fingers brushed the edge of a USB drive, a cold wallet, small and unassuming, tucked in a drawer for years. It held everything. I leaned back, my mind slipping to 2011 when it all began. The memory hit me sharply and clearly. I was 48, hunched over a clunky monitor in a cramped office that smelled of stale coffee and paper. The screen glowed with a forum post about Bitcoin, a new, risky idea that some guy called the future. My heart raced as I scrolled. I'd always been cautious, but something about it felt right. Corinne's voice echoed shrilly from the past through the phone. You're wasting money again, Martin. We need that for Madison's school. I ignored her, my fingers flying across the keyboard. $590 for 59 coins. I hit buy and smiled, a spark of hope in my chest. Back then, I thought I was building something for us, for Madison's future, for Corinne's dreams. I worked late, fixed networks, paid bills. Madison, just 13, barely noticed me. Dad, whatever, she'd say, eyes glued to her phone. To her phone. Corinne always wanted more. Corinne's husband had bought her a diamond and she'd complain, her voice sharp as a knife. I kept quiet, my secret tucked away. The coin sat in the cold wallet, forgotten as life ground on. Now, in 2025, I pulled the USB drive from the drawer. Its plastic was scratched, but it felt alive in my hand. My office was a tomb, its dusty shelves holding a family photo that I couldn't bear to face. The computer wheezed as I plugged in the drive. My hands shook, not from fear, but from certainty. I typed the password, each keystroke deliberate. The screen blinked, then loaded. There it was, 59 BTC. I did the maths in my head at today's price, nearly $6 million. I exhaled. The number sank in, 6 million, more than enough to change everything. My eyes stung, not with joy but with rage. I'd given them everything, years, money, my pride, and they'd spat it back. Madison's voice at dinner calling me a failure. Corinne's cold, cruel laugh. They didn't deserve this, not anymore. I leaned forward, the chair creaking. Screen lit my face, casting shadows on the walls. I remembered the nights I'd spent learning, risking, hopping for them, and how they'd thrown it all away. "You'll see," I whispered, my voice steady. The wallet was real, the money was mine, and I knew exactly what to do with it. I unplugged the drive and slid it back into the drawer. The computer powered down, the hum fading to silence. My phone sat on the desk, its cracked screen catching the light. I picked it up, my thumb hovering over a number, an attorney I'd found weeks ago, just in case. My finger pressed call and the line rang once, twice. A voice answered, calm and professional. "Mr. Grayson, how can I help?" I smiled, my eyes fixed on the phone. "We need to talk," I said. The attorney's office smelled of leather and ambition. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, glinting off a glass desk piled with papers. I sat across from Mr. Harlow, a man in a crisp suit with sharp eyes. My pen hovered over the contract, steady as my pulse. "Selling 5 coins will net you $500,000, he said, his voice clipped. "What's the next step?" I signed my name, the ink flowing smoothly. "Keep it quiet," I replied. "That's all for now," he nodded, sliding the papers into a folder. The deal was done. I left the office, my steps light on the polished floor. Outside, Fairfield buzzed, cars hummed and leaves rustled in the June breeze. My phone stayed silent in my pocket, its cracked screen hiding the truth. 5 bitcoins sold, $500,000. Karen and Madison had no idea. The thought made my chest hum, not with pride but with purpose. They'd mocked me for years, calling me a failure. Soon they'd see. Back home, Karen waited in the hallway, arms crossed. Her blonde hair was pinned tight, but a strand hung loose, betraying her nerves. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice honeyed but sharp like a blade dipped in sugar. Her bracelet jangled as she tapped her phone. I tossed my keys onto the table. The clink was loud in the quiet house. "Out," I said, brushing past her. The air smelled of furniture polish and tension. She followed, her heels clicking. "Don't play games, Martin. I found that lawyer's card in your drawer." Her eyes narrowed, searching my face. I kept my expression blank, but inside I hummed with purpose. They'd mocked me for years, calling me a failure. Soon they'd see, she asked, her voice honeyed but sharp like a blade dipped in sugar. Her bracelet jangled as she tapped her phone. I tossed my keys onto the table, the clink loud in the quiet house. "Out," I said, brushing past her. The air smelled of furniture polish and tension. She followed, her heels clicking. "Don't play games, Martin. I found that lawyer's card in your drawer." Her eyes narrowed, searching my face. I kept my expression blank. Inside I smiled. She'd been snooping just as I'd expected. "You're up to something," she hissed, stepping closer. "What is it?" I shrugged. "Silence is a wall," I said, my tone calm, almost bored. Her lips pursed, her fingers twitching around her phone. I headed to the kitchen, pouring a glass of water. Karen lingered in the doorway, her shadow stretching across the linoleum. "You've never given me what I deserve," she said, her voice low and bitter. "All those years of scraping by while my friends lived better." I sipped the water, letting her words slide off me. She wanted wealth, status, the life she'd envied at the golf club. She'd never worked for it, but she blamed me, always me. I set the glass down. The clink was sharp. "Things are about to change," I said, meeting her gaze. Her eyes widened just for a second before she masked it with a scoff. "You'll change nothing," she laughed, but it was brittle like glass about to crack. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The seeds had been planted. Later, I took a walk through the neighborhood. The dusk was settling over the manicured lawns. Karen's car crept along a block behind, her headlights dim. She thought she was being clever, tailing me like a detective in a bad movie. I kept my pace steady, my hands in my pockets, and let her follow, let her wonder. She'd find nothing but questions. I stopped at the park, the cool air against my face. My phone buzzed once, a confirmation from Harlow that the funds were in my account. I pulled it out, dialed a number, and kept walking. My voice was low. "It's just the start," I said. Behind me, Corinne's car idled, her silhouette stiff in the driver's seat. She was watching, but I was already miles ahead. The dining room was a battlefield. Cold coffee sat in mugs, and the air was thick with accusation. Corinne stood at the head of the table, her fists slamming down and rattling the spoons. "You're selfish, Martin," she shouted, her voice a whip hiding things sneaking around. "What are you doing to us?" Madison slouched in her chair, her phone glowing, her fingers flying across the screen. "You're ruining everything, Dad," she snapped, her eyes flashing. "Everyone's going to know what a loser you are." Her words cut, but I sat still, my hands gripping the chair's edge. I'd walked into this ambush after my walk, Corinne's car trailing me home. Now they were unloading, their voices rising like a storm. "You've always held us back," Corinne said, her bracelet clinking as she pointed. "Now you're playing some game I won't stand for it." Her face was flushed, her eyes desperate. Madison smirked, tapping her phone. "Check this." Her voice dripped with scorn as she held up the screen, displaying a post she had just published. "My dad's a washed-up nobody," it read, accompanied by a sad face emoji. My stomach twisted, but I kept a blank face. "You think that hurts me?" I said, my voice low and steady. Madison's smirk faltered. Corinne stepped closer, her heels loud on the hardwood. "I'm done, Martin. I'll file for divorce. You'll get nothing." Her words hung heavily in the air, but I didn't flinch. I'd heard her bluffs before. She wanted control, not freedom. Madison scrolled through her phone, muttering, "Why isn't anyone liking this?" Her confidence was cracking, and her need for validation was showing through. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness matching the mood. Their words were loud, but they were flailing, grasping at shadows. They didn't know about the bitcoins, the 500,000 sitting in my account. They didn't know I was building something bigger than their insults. "Do what you want," I said, setting the mug down. "It won't change a thing." Karen's eyes blazed and her jaw tightened. "You're impossible," she hissed, storming out of the door and slamming it behind her. Eiley stayed, her fingers hovering over her phone. "You're pathetic," she said, but her voice trembled. She wanted a reaction, a fight. I gave her nothing. I stood up, the chair scraping, and looked at her. "You're digging your own hole," I said. Her eyes widened, but she didn't answer. I walked out, their shouts echoing in my head, each one fueling my resolve. In the hallway, I pulled out my phone, its cracked screen catching the dim light. Their accusations were noise, nothing more. I'd spent years absorbing their scorn, but now I was moving, and they couldn't stop me. I dialed my broker, keeping my voice low. "Time to start," I said, my eyes on the closed dining room door. Madison's post was still open on her phone, glowing like a weak spark. Let her post, let them scream. I was already beyond their reach. The broker's office buzzed with quiet energy. Coffee scented the air and screens flickered with stock charts. I sat across from Miss Carter, her glasses perched low as she typed. "Selling 5 bitcoins, buying shares in next-gen tech," she said, her voice brisk. "Risky but doable." I nodded, my fingers tapping the armrest. "Make it quick," I said, "and keep it off the radar." She raised an eyebrow but complied. Her mouse clicked, $500,000 shifted, silent as a shadow. My plan was in motion. Back home, I locked myself in my office. The computers hummed. They were my only company. The screen glowed as I opened an anonymous forum. My fingers were steady on the keys. "NextGen's about to skyrocket," I typed. "Insider tip." By now I hit send. Post vanished into the digital void. A smile tugged at my lips. Corinne's friend Susan had bragged about NextGen at the golf club, and Corinne had listened, her eyes hungry. They'd all take the bait later. I stood at a charity gala. The room was alive with clinking glasses and soft laughter. White tablecloths gleamed, and flowers perfumed the air. I donated 50,000 to a local shelter, and now people were shaking my hand, smiling warmly. "Mr. Grayson, you're a blessing." a woman said, handing me a thank you letter. I nodded, the paper crisp in my hand. For years I'd been invisible, but now eyes followed me, respectful. It felt good, but it wasn't the goal. My phone stayed in my pocket, silent but heavy. I'd checked it earlier. My forum post was gaining traction, the likes piling up. Karen was probably at home, scrolling through her phone, her greed pulling her in. I pictured her eyes glued to the screen, whispering to Susan about the next big thing she'd invest in, blind to the trap. The thought steadied me like a compass pointing true. At the gala, a man clapped me on the shoulder. "Heard you're making waves, Martin." I smiled vaguely. "Just helping out," I replied. The letter in my hand felt like a shield, proof of who I could be. Karen and Madison saw a failure, these people saw a giver. Soon they'd all see the truth. I left the event, the night air cool against my face. At home, Karen sat in the living room, her phone glowing. Susan said, "Next gen's a gold mine," she said, her voice eager, not looking up. "I'm putting everything in her hands." Her fingers swiped, sealing her choice. I paused, my hand on the stair rail. "Good luck," I said, my tone flat. Her eyes flicked to me, suspicious, but I was already moving. In my office, I shut the door, the lock clicking. The computer screen waited, dark but ready. Karen's words, everything she'd said, echoed in my mind. My smile grew cold and sure. I sat down, my fingers brushing the phone. The next step was close, and I was ready. The dining room was a mess. Coffee mugs were scattered, and a napkin was crumpled on the floor. Karen stood by the table, her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was shrill. "What do you mean it crashed? I lost 40,000,000,000." She spun, her eyes wild, mascara streaking her cheeks. Madison hovered near the doorway, biting her nails, her phone dark in her hand. I sat at the table, stirring sugar into my coffee, the spoon clinking softly. Their panic was a symphony, and I was the conductor. Karen slammed her phone onto the couch, the thud muffled by the cushions. "You did this, Martin," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger. Her hair was a tangled halo and her bracelet jangled. "You sabotaged me." I raised an eyebrow, my face calm. "Did I?" I said, my voice low and almost amused. Her accusation had no teeth, no proof. I'd worked through my broker, clean and untraceable. Next-gen stock had plummeted just as I'd planned. Madison shifted, her eyes darting between us. "Mom, maybe it's not him," she said, her voice small. Karen whirled on her. "Don't defend him." "He's ruined us." Madison flinched, her fingers tightening around her phone. She looked lost, her confidence gone. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness sharp. Karen's debts, credit cards and loans had been her noose. She had tied it herself, chasing Susan's promises of wealth. "You chose where to put your money," I said, setting my mug down. Karen's face twisted, her breath hitching. "You knew," she spat. "You knew it would fail." I shrugged, my silence a blade. She stormed closer, her heels clicking. "I'll prove it, Martin. I'll drag you down with me." Her threat was empty, but her eyes burned. Madison stayed quiet, her gaze fixed on the floor. A crack was forming between them, and I felt it widen. I stood, the chair scraping. Their eyes followed me. Karen's were full of fury, and Madison's were full of uncertainty. "I'm not your problem," I said, my voice steady. "You are." Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. I walked out, their silence heavy in the hallway. I grabbed my coat, the letter of thanks from the charity still in my pocket, its weight grounding me, a reminder of who I was becoming. Outside, I climbed into my car, the engine humming to life. Karen's screams faded as I drove, the letter on the passenger seat catching the streetlights. The town was quiet. Fairfield's lawn after neat lawn stretched out under the dusk. I'd pushed the first domino and it felt right. My phone stayed silent, but I didn't need it now. The next move was waiting, and I was ready. The charity event glowed with warmth. White tablecloths, soft lanterns, the clink of glasses. I stood on a small stage, a framed letter of thanks in my hands. "Martin Grayson's generosity has changed lives," the host said, his voice booming. The crowd clapped, their faces bright with admiration. I nodded, smiling modestly, but inside I burned with quiet triumph. For years I'd been invisible, but now Fairfield saw me. I stepped down, shaking hands, the letter tucked under my arm. A woman in a blue dress squeezed my hand. "You're a hero, Martin," she said. I murmured thanks, my eyes scanning the room. The air smelled of roses and possibility. My donation of $50,000 had made waves, and the ripples were reaching Corinne and Madison across town. Corinne sat in the golf club, her cocktail glass trembling. The green stretched outside, the grass sharp under the sun, but the air inside was cold. Her friend Susan leaned over, her voice low. "You're Martin, the one who gave all that money. Why didn't you say?" Corinne's smile froze, her fingers tightening on the glass. "It's complicated," she said, her voice thin. Another woman whispered, "He's a saint." 000 to the shelter had made waves, and the ripples were reaching Corinne and Madison across town. Corinne sat in the golf club, her cocktail glass trembling. The green stretched outside, the grass sharp under the sun, but the air inside was cold. Her friend Susan leaned over, her voice low. "You're Martin, the one who gave all that money. Why didn't you say?" Corinne's smile froze, her fingers tightening on the glass. "It's complicated," she said, her voice thin. Another woman whispered, "He's a saint, and you're so quiet about it." The word stung, and Corinne's face flushed. Her status, her armor was cracking. Madison wasn't faring better at home. She sat on her bed, her phone glowing with comments. "How can you trash your dad?" one read. "He's helping people and you're whining," said another. Her post about her calling her a failure had backfired. She swiped her hands, shaking, and deleted it, but the damage was done. Her followers had dropped her and her inbox was filled with criticism. "I didn't mean it," she said. She whispered, but no one cared. Her world built on likes was crumbling. I left the event, the night air cool against my face. The sunset painted the sky orange, a promise of something new. I'd spent years in their shadow, absorbing their scorn. Now they were the ones fatting. Corinne's friends were pulling away, their invitations drying up. Madison's online empire was shrinking, and so was her confidence. I felt no pity. They'd built their cages and I'd handed them the keys. I drove home, the letter on the seat beside me, its words of gratitude and respect acting as a shield against their venom. My phone buzzed with a message from the mayor's office, inviting me to a council event. My name was spreading, my actions speaking louder than their lies. I parked outside a dark house except for a single light. As I stepped out, a sharp, desperate knock came at the door. I paused, my hand on the keys, and listened. The dining room smelled of damp carpet and defeat. Corinne stood before me, her hands clasped, her eyes red. "Martin, please," she said, her voice breaking. "We're sorry, we were wrong." Madison lingered behind, tears streaking her face, her phone silent for once. "Dad, I didn't mean it," she whispered, her voice raw. Their apologies were a hollow performance, like the cracked walls around us. I stood by the table, arms crossed, unmoved. Corinne stepped closer, grabbed my hand and dug her nails in. "We're broke, Martin. The club shut me out. We need you." Her words were syrupy, but her eyes flickered with calculation. Madison nodded, wiping her nose. "My friends won't talk to me," she said, her voice small. "I deleted the post. I swear." I pulled my hand free, the motion sharp. Their tears didn't touch me. I'd heard their lies before. "You made your choices," I said, my voice cold as stone. Corinne's face crumpled, but her jaw tightened. "You can't abandon us," she said, her tone shifting accusatory. Madison looked down, her shoulders shaking. I saw her fear, real maybe, but it changed nothing. They had mocked me, belittled me for years, and now they wanted salvation. I wasn't their savior. I turned, walking out, their pleas fatting. Later, I sat in a realtor's office. The air was crisp with fresh paint, and a panoramic window framed the Fairfield skyline. Keys gleamed on the desk. "The house is yours," the realtor said, sliding the papers over. I signed, my hand steady. The pen scratched loudly in the quiet. A new home, clean and mine, waited. No echoes of their voices, no ghosts of their scorn. The keys were cool in my hand, their weight a promise. I'd sold more bitcoins, enough to start afresh. Corinne and Madison could keep the old house, its creaks and cracks a mirror of their lives. I felt no guilt. "Everyone gets what they earn," I said, my voice low, almost to myself. The realtor smiled, unaware of the war I'd fought. She handed me the keys, their jingle bright. I drove to the new house, its windows dark but welcoming. I parked, staring at the clean lines, the empty rooms waiting for a life I'd build alone. My phone buzzed, a message from the city council. They wanted me at an event, a speaker for their fundraiser. My name carried weight now, a currency Corinne and Madison could never touch. I stepped out, the keys in my hand. When the phone rang again, I answered. My voice was calm. "I'll be there," I said. The city hall smelled of polished wood and pride. I stood at the podium, the weight of a cool brass medal in my hands. "Martin Grayson's $1 million donation will transform our community," the mayor said, his voice echoing. The crowd erupted in applause like a wave. I nodded, my face humble, but inside I soared. Corinne and Madison sat in the back, their faces pale, their eyes fixed on me. No one looked at them, they were ghosts in my moment. I scanned the room, the wooden beams flickering, chandeliers, the scent of coffee lingering. Corinne clutched her purse, her knuckles white. Madison hunched low, her phone hidden in her lap. I saw Susan, Corinne's golf club friend, turn away when Corinne leaned to whisper. The rejection was sharp, a blade in Corinne's pride. Madison's shoulders shook, her usual bravado was gone. I felt no pity, they'd built this cage. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. "This is for Fairfield." The crowd cheered again, their faces warm and open. For years I'd been the quiet man in the corner, but now I was their hero. The medal gleamed, a symbol of everything I'd earned. Corinne's lips moved in a silent mutter. "It's a lie," she said, but no one cared. Madison's eyes darted, seeking an escape that wasn't there. Later, I packed the last box in the old house. The dining room was a wreck, with cracked walls and a dusty table. The air was heavy with neglect. My footsteps echoed as I carried boxes to the car. Corinne and Madison could keep this place. Its creaks mirrored their lives. I didn't look back. The keys to my new house jangled in my pocket, their sound bright like a bell. I drove to the new place, its windows catching the dusk. The air inside was clean and sharp with fresh paint. I set the medal on a bare shelf, its shine soft in the empty room. The silence was mine, not theirs. There's no arguments, no scorn, just space to breathe. I walked through the house, my steps light on the hardwood. This was freedom. Outside, Fairfield was settling into the evening. Lawns were glowing under streetlights. My phone stayed quiet, but the mayor's words rang in my head. $1 million, a legacy. Corinne and Madison had lost more than money. Their status and their allies were gone. I'd taken nothing from them. They hadn't thrown. I sat at the kitchen counter, the keys beside me, their edges catching the light. The house was still, but alive with possibility. Then a sharp, insistent knock came at the door. I stood, my hand brushing my phone. My fingers paused over the screen, ready. The new house was quiet, its minimalist living room bathed in evening light. The knock came again, louder and more desperate. I opened the door, and there they were. Karen, her face was streaked with mascara and Madison's eyes were red. She was clutching her arms. "Martin, please," Corinne said, her voice cracking. "We're done for, you have to help us." Madison nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Dad, we messed up." "We're sorry." Their words dripped with need, but I heard the old venom beneath. You've done nothing, Madison added, her eyes flickering. But we need you now. I stood in the doorway, my face a mask. The room behind me smelled of fresh paint, the hardwood gleaming under a single lamp. A clock ticked on the wall, its rhythm steady. Come in, I said, my tone flat. They shuffled inside, Corinne's purse dangling, Madison's sneakers scuffing the floor. The space felt too clean for their chaos. I closed the door, the click sharp. Corinne launched into her hands, ringing. The debts are crushing us, she said, her voice rising. The club's gone, my friends are gone, you're our only hope. Madison sniffled, her eyes on the floor. No one talks to me anymore, she said. I've lost everything. Their apologies were thin, a performance to save themselves. I'd heard it before, their lies dressed in tears. I pulled my phone from my pocket, its cracked screen catching the light. You think I've done nothing? I said, my voice low and deliberate. I tapped the screen, opened the wallet app and held it up. Green text glowed. 59 BTC, $5.9 million. Their jaws dropped. Corinne gasped and Madison sank onto the couch. I bought them in 2011, I said. $590 for us, and you called me a failure. Corinne's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes were wide. You hid this, she stammered. Madison stared, tears spilling, but she said nothing. Nothing, I lowered the phone, my gaze hard. You had your chance, I said. Every day you chose to tear me down. Now you live with it. The clock ticked louder, filling the silence. Their faces were frozen, awaiting the truth they couldn't lift. I turned, walking to the door. Martin, wait, Karen cried, falling to her knees, her hands clawing at the air. Madison sobbed, gripping the couch. I didn't stop you. You're cruel, Corinne shouted, but her voice broke. I opened the door, the night air cool against my face. No, I said, not looking back. I'm fair. I stepped outside, the door shutting with a thud. My car waited, its engine a soft hum. I started it, the sunset burning orange, a fire across the sky. I drove, the phone on the seat beside me screaming. Dark now, their faces lingered in my mind, but not their pain, only their shock, their realization that I'd shown them the truth, and that was enough. The terrace of my new house was my sanctuary. The morning air was crisp with the scent of coffee. I sat at a glass table, my laptop open, documents spread before me. Another donation, $200 for a youth center, waiting for my signature. The pen scratched softly, each stroke a step further from the past. Fairfield stretched beyond the railing, its roofs gold in the dawn. I was home, not just in this house, but in myself. Across town, Corinne and Madison worked at a diner. There lives a stark contrast. The place was loud, reeking of fried potatoes and grease. Corinne wiped tables, her apron stained, her movements sharp with resentment. He did this to us, she muttered to a coworker, tossing a rag onto the counter. Her voice was bitter but tired. Madison carried a tray, her step slow, her eyes downcast. Mom, stop, she said, her voice flat. We did this. The tray wobbled, plates clinking, and she steadied it. Her phone was silent in her pocket. I'd seen them once from a distance. Their faces were drawn, their pride gone. They worked to survive. Their status was a memory. I felt no joy in their struggle, only balance. They'd mocked me for years, calling me nothing while I paid their way. Madison's college, Corinne's jewels. I'd given everything and they'd spat it back. Now they facing the world they built. My laptop pinged with a message from the charity. Your gift will change lives. I smiled, the words warming me. The terrace was quiet, save for the rustle of leaves. I'd found purpose here, in giving, in building. The cold wallet, still locked in a safe, held millions, but it wasn't the money that had freed me. It was the choice to walk away, to live for myself. I stood, coffee mug in hand, and I stepped to the railing. The sunset painted the sky with soft, final colors. I thought of the old house, its creaks and shadows, and the years I'd spent there, shrinking under their words. I'd carried their weight for too long, but no more. I gave them everything, I said, my voice a whisper. Now I'm free. The mug warmed my hands. The sky deepened to purple. Fairfield was mine not as a conqueror, but as a man I'd found my place. Corinne and Madison would continue their lives as they wished. I didn't hate them. I didn't need to. I'd found something better for myself. The horizon glowed, and I knew I was home.